So I'd like to, before I start talking about this, describing the project to you, I'll just spend a few moments telling you why we did design Parramatta in a very broad sense. This is a photo of Parramatta. It's about 23 kilometres from the city of Sydney. And it's in a process at the moment stepping up to become kind of the new Western CBD. By 2050, there will be more than 50% of Sydney's population will be living west of Auburn. But we have an unusual situation in Sydney where our capital city is so far east of the vast population. So Parramatta's been there for a long time, but it has been kind of slipping along in the doldrums, but it's in a kind of a big process of dynamic change at the moment. And we do have a lot of planning frameworks and metro strategies and all sorts of projects happening for increasing Parramatta's capacity to become a city. But probably one of the most important things we can do is focus on the public domain. And the public domain is the public spaces of the city. It's the streets, the parks, the lanes and the squares. And they're all the places that everyone walks. They're also all the places that everyone has their public social discourse. They're also the places where, as Rodney pointed out, can really support the economic vitality of a city. So this project was a project that tried to look at improving the public domain in quite a creative way. And these are photos of some of our public domain at the moment. So you can see that we have some space, and in Parramatta, because it is actually a city, we also have people there, at least quite a lot of workers during the day. But you can see that large portions of our city aren't particularly dynamic and vital at the moment. And I think Dr. Tolley made a very good point about the thing that attracts people most to walk is giving them quality. So overwhelmingly, Design Parramatta was a project that looked at trying to get some quality into our public domain. And I work in a local government. I haven't always worked in a local government. I come from a background in architecture and landscape architecture and urban design. So it's it's kind of a slightly unusual area to work in. And when you start looking at how the public domain is actually made, because local government is one of the bodies that actually produces the stuff that we use to walk around in and that we experience in a city. And the things that are important in making the public domain, well, you've got wherever you are, that's the context. You've got your land and the landform of the city. I think someone talked about how much cycling there is in Holland and Copenhagen. Well, one would say that there's a lot of cycling there because they're flat. There's probably a whole lot of other reasons that the cycling happens there, but there's physical aspects of any site and place and city that you have to take into consideration if you're going to make it work as a place. Overlaid to that is a survey of how the city or the place was laid out initially, and I think that was a little bit about what Romilly was talking about. When we make new communities, we have to plan and design them in a way that's going to support these sorts of things. And then you have your strategies and your policies that try and impact upon how people might use those places. And they get turned into planning policies. They're the rules that the developers and people have to use when they're building or changing parts of those places. But the thing that actually creates the city or the place where you're making other projects that are the result of all those layers of things that happen. And so the Design Parramatta tried to look at the city from the perspective of a whole lot of projects for different public domain areas and knitting them together to make a new vision for the city. We're pretty lucky there. We started off with good bones. This is a drawing. The yellow streets are the streets that were laid out in the Georgian times, which is in like the early 1800s. So one of the ways that you get people to use the public domain is to make it easy for them to use the public domain and to make it very accessible. And that depends upon, distances to cross intersections and how fine your street grid is. And Parramatta, because it was primarily laid out, the city, at a time when people could only get around by walking, has actually got a very fine walkable grid. And so we started out with good bones, but I think you could see from the photo I showed you earlier that we haven't made the most of those to date. And the other point I just want to make about that is that we felt that we needed to look at the city as all those public spaces together as a network. because they all support each other, and they need to work together. And so that's why we wanted to create a vision for the whole city to start off with. This is just an image from a photo, a project that happened in the 1990s for the City of Sydney. I'm not sure if, I'm sure you all are aware of what Sydney was like probably in the late 1980s, and the huge changes that have happened to Sydney City's public domain in that time. There's been an incredible uplift in the quality of the footpaths and the parks and the public spaces. And the project that probably helped to initiate part of this was a project called Sydney Spaces, and this was I used as a kind of a precedent for Design Parramatta because I'd worked on it, and I could see that it was quite successful. And briefly, Sydney Spaces mapped the different black areas, different sites in Sydney, and it selected them, and it was managed by Helen Lockard when she was working at the City of Sydney. And then she wrote a little brief for each of those projects, and she gave it to a different multidisciplinary design team. And they worked up a concept idea, and she put them all together, and she called it Sydney Spaces. And pretty much all those projects, I think bar Circular Quay, and there's one other one, have been realised now, one way or another. They may not have been realised precisely as the concept design, which was often just like a little cartoon sketch showing an idea, but they have all been built. And so what I think was really interesting about this was it helped people, and especially the councillors, the decision makers, to see the city as a network of public spaces rather than just a place where there's lots of buildings that need to be built to support economic activity. It allowed the public spaces and the streets to be seen together and to work collectively for the city. So Design Parramatta pretty much ran along that similar model, but we've sort of incorporated a number of other aspects into it. We started out by putting out an EOI for multidisciplinary design teams to apply to become part of it, and we had over 80 teams, both local, national, international, apply for it, and most of the teams had at least 4 different sorts of design and other consultants involved. So we had over 320 different individuals, I guess, applying to be part of the project. Something else that we did is we set up a website for it because we needed to give it kind of a presence that was sort of gave it a different kind of vibe from how people might normally think about Parramatta City, and to make it very obvious that we were really seeking very excellent and interesting and very creative design thinking for this project. And of course, if you are going to have design, you need to have some designers. So here are some of the photos from the designers that we had at the, we had 3 interactive workshops. So what we did is we wrote briefs for each of the sites, and after we'd selected the teams that were going to be given each of the brief, there was a 6-week design project period. And within that period, there were 3 interactive workshops. And so the teams were given their site, they were given lots of information. They had to go away and come back with a concept. There were all-day workshops where they would put their concepts up in the auditorium where we were, and they would explain it to the people sitting there watching, and there would be a lot of feedback, and they'd take that feedback away, and then they came back with some more work. So it was a very interactive kind of environment. And that's an image from one of the workshops, the all-day workshops. And we also had a panel there, as well as having people from the council to provide feedback. We had people, academics, to provide their sort of considered response, and to also try and generate some conversation, because I guess that we were trying to understand the city as a place that can hold a lot of different views and opinions. And to do that, you need to engender a good conversation. Another thing, as the project progressed, a few people suggested that we probably should film the project. And we were very lucky to get a filmmaker, Kati Linebark, to come on board at the very last moment. And this was actually really fantastic because in addition, she undertook to film some of the design teams as they were undertaking their projects. which kind of made quite interesting little documentary pieces. And she also filmed the workshops and she pieced it together. So she kind of gave a whole other layer to the project. And I guess it's great having the film because you can sort of go back. There was a lot of ideas happening in that time, and it's good, you can go back and actually take in some of the detail when you look at it. And what happened at the end with the projects is that we, with the 16 sites, we had each project was presented as a number of sheets and a kind of a concept vision for it. And we pieced them together and put them, this is a plan of Parramatta City, and you can see that it's got the different numbers on it and it's got a number of colours. So for instance, the red, you can see there's 4 red streets there, so they're kind of the main streets projects. So those projects were thought about individually and as a group of parts of the city that could have similar characteristics. And similarly, we had parks, we had lanes, and we had art. So we put them together, and they were presented as a combined master plan framework. And this has been adopted by council. So this is the framework that will be taken forward into the future and for the next 20 years. And this framework will form the basis for the future public domain work that needs to happen in the city. So I'll just quickly show you a few of the projects, just to give you an idea. So there's a before and after. So this is our River Foreshore, which was a magnificent project done by a combined team, Environmental Partnership, Turf, Robert Stay, Aquatica. This is a project for the Ring Road, which is the Parramatta City Ring Road around the city. Fantastic thing about this was that their concept was, as well as keeping it as a ring road, they turned it into something that would help people to meet and greet on rather than creating a barrier in the city. This is a project that was done, put forward as a kind of a collaborative vision for one of the city lanes, and this team really worked with the people who actually have businesses on the lane to get them involved in changing that lane from a service lane full of garbage and cars to a place where people could also have nighttime activities. And this is a project that was done for a park, a brand new park that may happen in Parramatta. And just before I go, because I do know I need to finish now, the team that did this project also came up with one of the great things about Design Parramatta was that because it was done in a very collaborative way and with a lot of creative individuals, many people, whilst they gave us the answer to the brief that we provided with them, they also looked outside the brief and they started looking at broader picture of what could actually happen. So you'll see this is an aerial photo of Parramatta. You can see the river up there, and you can see there's like a fine green line that connects all the existing parks that actually ring the city. And then just down here in the right-hand corner, you'll see there's kind of a linear-looking park. That link doesn't actually exist, but the rest of the parkland does. And so what this team said, and their design site was actually in that new little green link. They said, look, you've got this fantastic amenity here. If you just made a few changes, you could actually create a 4-kilometre long green loop around the entire city, and that could become like an amazing amenity for the city. So I guess I'll finish up now, but I think that's a great image to finish on, and showing the power that involving design professionals in strategic city thinking and strategic city making for improving the public domain.